Thank you, Debbie, for playing the piano for us. One of the important things that we would like to do as we celebrate our sister's passing is to let those of you that would like to share some words to do so. And we're encouraging family members or church family members or people that have known her for years to feel free to share. Now, some folks are hard of hearing, and it'd be good to use the microphone up here. Just come on up and take turns sharing. If for any reason you can't do that, you can just stay where you are and just speak as loudly as you can so everybody can hear you. So I'm going to go ahead and just sit down here after I've shared a couple thoughts of my own. And I want you just to come up as you feel led to do so and share some thoughts. One of the things that Debbie and I really appreciate about Ruth was how quietly people-centered she was. You know, down through the years, I've been her pastor now for close to 30 years. And I don't remember ever giving her our birthday or anniversary. But every year, I get an anniversary card and a birthday card from Ruth. You know, and out of a congregation, that might be one of two or three. You know, I mean, it's not just, everybody doesn't give cards like that to people, and she did. Another thing that I really appreciate about Ruth, you know, she's always kind of thinking about where you're coming from. People-centered, you know. And so she would frequently come to church with a little clipping from the Missoula or from somewhere. Telling me about some development. So he's like, for example, she would give me several about Peter. You know, he's got some award as a radiocaster or whatever. And so she comes in, look at this, you know. And it's kind of good she did because we're not real big on subscribing to the Missoula. And so we kept up that way and knew what was going on because I could count on Ruth because she was just thoughtful. And she thought, well, Jim, I'd like to know this. And she'd bring me something about some fly fishing article or something. You know, I love to fish. You know, that's the kind of person she was. She just kind of, you know, oh, Jim would like that, or Susie would like that. I'm sure she did this for other people because that's the way she was. And, you know, she would just, of course, for the longest time, it was she and Julia, you know, and we just loved her. But it was just, you know, she just taken care of her. And never felt like a burden, ever. You know, she really loved people, and she did what she did because she wanted to, not because she had to. What an example of mature Christian love. What an example. And, you know, I could go on and on. I loved her humor. She could say some of the funniest little quips, you know, kind of a dry. She had a way of seeing things that was just humor. She, you know, wasn't a big jokester, but she had a wit to her, and she's so bright. And I mean, right to the last day, she's talking and laughing and sharing information, and she's just so bright and so intelligent and so stimulating to be with. And also, one of the keys of being an effective adult is how well you raise your kids. And I've gotten to know two of the kids real well because they were the younger ones that came to our church with her. But I've met, you know, Judy and Ron as well. But, you know, I'm just impressed with the kind of people she brought in this world and the kind of people they became. And I think that's an evidence of what she was like as a mother and as an example. And so I think she really does offer us a great inspiration as we think about her and remember her. So I'm going to shut up for a few minutes and just sit down. And those of you that like to share, why don't you come up and do so.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm Ruth's youngest kid. And my Aunt Joyce, who lives in Arizona, asked me to say something. And she couldn't travel to be here today, but she would have wanted to be here. She was my mom's brother's wife. She still is. A few recollections of my dear sister-in-law. Not everyone is blessed to have a sister-in-law like Ruth. She was loving, caring, and thoughtful, always thinking of others. We had a special bond that has lasted over the years. After she moved to Montana, we visited her every year and had wonderful times sightseeing, mall walking, and visiting. She loved to garden, and that's, you all know that. Her cooking specialty was pork and dumplings. I have happy memories and feel greatly blessed by having had her in my life, and I will always miss her. Now I have some things I wanted to say. Just looking around, my mom's friends were a very diverse group of people. Very diverse. And I have to say, she was a complete Democrat and a bleeding heart liberal and a member of a labor union and all that. And I doubt that many of her friends were any of those things. But the one thing everybody agreed on was that she was special and she loved everybody. She took you where you were. There's some things that I don't think everybody knows. People don't know that she spoke languages. She spoke French and Czech, and she knew Latin. And I wanted to tell people that I think she was one of the bravest women I knew. She raised kids by herself 2 different times. Her first marriage, she married a man who turned out to be an alcoholic and an abusive one at that. And when my oldest brother and sister were still toddlers, she said, "This cannot continue, I'm divorcing him." A delegation of my mom's uncles went to her and tried to talk her out of that. "Why are you shaming the family with a divorce? We've never had a divorce in this family." And she said, "Well, he drinks a lot, and when he drinks, he beats me up, and he beats me up in front of the children. And I'm not living that way." And they did not help her very much, but she didn't live that way. She went and got sometimes 2 jobs at a time. She lived with her mother. She worked nights so that she could be a mom during the day. She did all that stuff for us. Probably nobody here ever saw her in a short sleeve shirt. Unless you snuck up on her while she was mowing the grass on an August day or something. Because on this side, she had scars from, she was working in this plastics factory that made rocking horses, and an injection molding machine just sprayed plastic all over her one day. And she was embarrassed to not wear long-sleeve shirts. And I don't think people knew that about her. She eventually married my dad, which was fine for a while, and then he got cancer and died, and she did it all over again, 2 kids by herself. She basically just took care of everybody her whole life. Her father had Parkinson's disease, and it was early onset. It started in his 30s, and he lived to be 85. And she took care of him the whole time, and he was a handful. She took care of her mother, Julia, who you all know. She took care, for a while when my mom was younger, she was driving half the elderly women in Missoula to their doctor's appointments. And she took care of all of us. And I think most of us would say that the best parts of who we are, I'm speaking for her kids now, they came from her, you know. If I can paint pictures now, it's because she kept bringing me art supplies. She took us to Montana, which I will be always grateful for. 3 of the 4 of us turned out to be journalists of one form or another. And I remember once at a dinner party, the person I was sitting with remarked on that, says, "Oh, your dad must have been a journalist." I said, "My dad had nothing to do with it. You know, it was all my mom." And it wasn't that she was a journalist, but she kept a house full of books and newspapers and intelligent discussion. She taught me how to be a mom. She taught me how to have faith. We had a thing going on at my school, a 3rd grader who came down with liver cancer and died, and it was pretty horrible. And I got to the point where I couldn't pray anymore. I was too mad, but my mom kept going. So in a nutshell, Proverbs 31, the part where it talks about a good woman. My mom's picture is there if you look it up. A good woman, who can find? Her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Charm is deceptive. Beauty is fleeting. But a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised.
Amen.
Amen.
since we've known Ruth, but it's been many years, and everything that has been said is, I don't know that I can add to it. It was wonderful to read the obituary. There were things I didn't know about your mother. I didn't know she spoke 4 languages. She was so alive. She just lived. And when Sam called and I had the opportunity to go and speak with Ruth a day or so before she passed away, boy, she was alive then. And when I left the hospital, it was like, well, I was told that this was serious and she wasn't going to be living long, and it was just so hard to grasp that because she was so alive yet. I took her hand and I'd been out in the cold and my hands were cold, and I said, I'm sorry, my hands are cold. She says, oh, it feels so good. And then we were discussing or visiting with the family, and something tickled me, and I laughed. And she says, it's so good to hear that laugh. And she just was just in the present all the time. And she was always interested, and she knew what was going on in your life. If you would share with her, she didn't forget it. And she was always keeping up to date with what was happening with our family, with our children and our grandchildren, and just a remarkable, remarkable woman. And I think the thing that I like most about her is she's Montana. She loved the outdoors, and she loved gardening, which I have a similar interest that way also. And but just, it was all I can say is it was a privilege to know your mother and to be able to just experience life with her. She was the essence of what good living is, and so we will miss her. She was a special woman.
Well, I've had the privilege of greeting Ruth most every Sunday for the last 8 or 10 years, and it's just been such a blessing because she'd come to the door and she'd stand there and wait for me to open it. She wouldn't reach for it. She might tap on it and say, hey, I'm here now, if I wasn't paying attention. And she's such a delight. And I got to give her a hug, and this shirt I'm wearing, I have a row of shirts that I rotate through, and every time I wore this, she'd say, oh, that's such a nice shirt. It must be because she liked flowers, because I didn't really pick this myself. My wife picked it, but it was just such a delight. She would, she paid attention. She just was always a delight to meet at the door, and she'd come in, and I'd give her a bullet and a hug, and I want to miss her. She's a real sweet person.
I met Ruth probably about 20 plus years ago. Her and Julia sat in the back row, same spot at the church every Sunday. And Lorelei and I took the spot right in front of them. And so that was the beginning of our relationship. And one of the things that Ruth and Julia, they tried when my dad passed away, and they'd never met him. But they drove down to Plains Paradise area for the viewing of his body, and just out of respect for us, and I always appreciated that. And they were tickled to come to Lorelei at my wedding. And again, same thing as with Jim. She never forgot our anniversary. There was always a card with a little check in there, and same thing on my birthday. And I just always appreciated that so much. And then she came to our home group that we had, and that's when we really got close to Ruth, was in our little Bible study in our home, and she was very faithful, came all the time. Gary and Beth Pulse were there, but one of the funnest days Ruth and I had, she called me up one morning and said, "You want to help me go buy a car?" I said, "You're dang right, so let's go spend your money." And so that was this last car she bought.
And we had to go to General Motors, had to go to Carl Tyler, and we searched, and she had the criteria. She had to have she wanted a bench seat, and wanted the gear shift up on the steering column, and they make very few of those. It's all bucket seats and gear shift on the floor. But we finally found one, the one that the last car she bought. And so anyhow, that was a fun day. Ruth was a very special friend of mine, and I just loved her a lot.
My name's Herb Hammack, and I was Ruth's veterinarian. I was letting the cat out this morning about 3:30, and I looked on the iPad, and I read the obituary, and the thing that hit me was the rabbit. I was the first one on the scene. It was this evening in the summer, as I recall. It's been a long time ago. But I get this call from Ruth, and she said, a rabbit just chased me, and I ran into the house, and it's on the front porch. And I said, well, I'll come over and take a look. I didn't live very far from her. And I came and I parked, and as many of you know, that she lived on a long lane off of 7th Street. And I parked fairly far from the house because I didn't know what we were getting involved in here. Well, I got out and started to walk forward, and all of a sudden here comes the rabbit running towards me, and got to me and put its front legs up on my leg, and I petted it. It was a jackrabbit. You know, you don't see jackrabbits in this part of the country that often. So I don't know what the story was on the rabbit, but I looked at her house, and there she was peeking out the window. I assured her the rabbit was fine. It had to have been somebody's pet, and I don't know what the story was before that. But anyway, she had the rabbit, I know, into the winter, and I forget the story after that, whether it came back in the spring or what. But anyway, I always enjoyed, I treated her also her blind horse, and after we'd get done, I'd always go in and talk to her and her mother. Her mother always liked to visit, and as I recall, she lived to be well over 100, I think. Yeah. Anyway, it's one of the special stories that I gathered over 40-some years of practice, and she was a very nice lady. Thank you.
My name is Evan. I've known Ruth for a very long time. I went to high school with her youngest two children and dated Katie for quite a while. In terms of just the kind of trust and generosity she shows, I remember an occasion where I wanted to take Katie to the senior prom, and my parents wouldn't let me use their vehicle, and couldn't figure out how to get around, and Ruth's like, oh, no problem, you can use my car. So she let me take both her daughter and her car out. She was a very special woman, and she's going to be missed.
I'm Mark Person. I'm a nephew from the Chicago area. I've known Ruth my whole life, and she's a special woman. But I was sharing with Katie today when I brought my wife out to meet my grandmother and Ruth. We met after I rented a car at the airport, and we met at a diner or a restaurant. And had a nice, I think it was a lunch. And then we went out to 7th Street West, to the homestead, and Ruth was driving, of course, and we were driving down a dirt road, and she was going about 75 80 miles an hour. I'm like, go away, Ruth. And so that was a great memory. She was always, I think I took after her as she was quiet, but when she had something to say, it was very, very meaningful. So that's what I remember about Ruth. And I was going to say, too, when she was driving 75, 80 miles an hour, and I couldn't even see the car because all the dust was kicking up, I'm sure Grandma Julia would have had a smile on her face.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ruth's oldest daughter, Judy. And I apologize for having all these little papers here. I was jotting things down as we spend time in the hospital. Some things that she said, some things that I wanted you to know, just some interesting family history. One of her escapes from the care and keeping of grandparents was garage sailing. And boy, she got really good at it. There's a fortune in stuff there that she learned to identify, and she's had for 40 years, so let's see. That's you know, there's some interesting things in there that it was a surprise to her when we would repackage things and move things. Oh, that's right, I remember that. She, you know, when you put something away in storage, you yourself a lot of times forget what you have, so she's got some cool stuff back there. And one of the gals that she would run into frequently called her Little Bit. Oh. The John Wayne picture, she had always commented John Wayne could put his boots under her bed anytime. Now, you know, my mom's nature wasn't to be frivolous like that. That's just sort of what Mom felt about John Wayne. She loved bagpipes, bluegrass, opera. My goodness, I think the only thing she didn't enjoy was rap and that sort of stuff. Her scarf and sunglasses. When Mom was 16, she sunburned her eyes on the water at the lake and had to protect her eyes ever after that. So she never went anywhere without sunglasses. And even into the evening hours, you might catch her wearing them. Her scarf was a babushka, actually, Bohemian heritage. But it also protected her ears. She'd had, as a younger person, and a young adult even, a lot of ear infections. And the air hitting her ear a certain way was not a good thing, so she wore scarves a lot. Her favorite color is green. Her favorite flavor was chartreuse. I don't think I can look at anything with green walls. I'm doing that already, I've noticed, in a hotel room or when I'm walking somewhere. The shades of green on the walls, you know, that's Mom's shade of green. She liked Mary Alonzo, the singer. Gone with the Wind with Katharine Hepburn was her favorite of all time things. The Mikado was her favorite play. I'm trying to think. The first time she saw Gone with the Wind was in the theater, the Woods Theater, with Grandma and Aunt Ruth, who was Grandma's brother's wife. Grandma went with me to the Wilma for the re-showing of Gone with the Wind. It was the only book report that didn't kill me to give in honors English, which was a 1,000-page book. She found it disturbing that Bonnie Blue, the third child of Scarlett, Scarlett had a baby with Charlie Hamilton. And there was some discrepancy between the book and the movie. That's the only thing she had against it. Interesting. Liver dumplings and onions was something I would never order. But when Mom got to a Czech restaurant, watch out. She loved liver and onions, and actually I don't mind them. Locally, chicken and dumplings at Cracker Barrel was something that she favored. She sent away for a Bohemian cookbook. I didn't get this out of there. I jotted down, every once in a while when we talked, she'd say something and I actually listened. And sometimes I would ask her things to repeat because I didn't know if I remembered them right, but one of her favorite snacks as a child, you would take leaf lard and you'd cook it down, and then there would be pork crackling in the bottom of the pan. You would drizzle that on bread and then salt it. Never tried it. Okay. One of the explanations about her health circumstance that took her life was that there were blood clots in her mesentery vein system in her intestinal tract that caused all this stuff, and infections pursued, their course. Sometime later on, she's in bed. Now, Mom purposely kept her morphine to a minimum, and at some points cut it back so she could remain clear and visit with people and hear things. And I heard her comment, and you never knew if she was just kind of zoning out or resting or listening. The TV was on 24 hours a day at her house and in the hospital as well. And a lot of times you would find the old movies on, or something tame like Andy Griffith or something like that. Well, she said it's funny. And I said, what's funny? And I went closer and I said, what was funny? She said, well, she had this little daydreaming thing, and she said, well, it was funny to have a mesentery floating by. So, that struck her funny too. It just how your mind does goofy things. It takes information and sorts through it. Even when you're in that stage, she was finding humor in goofy things. At one point in time, we were talking about family, and she said, my mom and dad were an odd